This is 7th grade science, Introduction to Plants, cycle number 1 video. You guys had just finished up a lab in which I had asked you to do several things with different plants. The first thing I asked you to do was to collect a sample of algae from the Milwaukee River, and then I also asked you to collect a flowering plant and also a green plant from a tree. And once you had those, I asked you to grab a microscope and to look at them underneath, trying to find the cell wall and to find the cells, and hopefully you're able to do that. After you had completed that, I asked for you to try to figure out a way that plants are classified, and then finally trying to look at how plants reproduce, so how they make new plants. And so in this video we're going to go through each one of those, and this also includes your notes for section 1. And the first section in our book is titled The Plant Kingdom, and so let's take a look at it. To start off with, I wanted to show you a picture of the cell wall. And so this is a picture of a plant cell. Out on the outside there is a very thick wall that helps to protect the plant. It also gives it its crunchiness. If you've ever crinkled up a plant, you can hear it kind of sounds a little bit roughly, and so that is the cell wall, and what's happening is that you're cracking that. Versus an animal cell which does not have a cell wall. Okay, and typically when we're looking at plant cells, they are usually drawn in a square type fashion. That's kind of the look of them, where animal cells are more rounded, like you can see down here. And so this would be more of a plant cell, this would be an animal cell. And so the characteristics that plants have is that nearly all plants are autotrophs, so they make their own food, which hopefully you know at this point in time, and they do that through photosynthesis. Plants are eukaryotes, which means that they have a nucleus. Most of them are multicellular, meaning that they have many cells, and as we had mentioned, that they have a cell wall. Plants produce their own food through a process called photosynthesis, and the way that photosynthesis works, and we're going to talk a lot about this in the next section, is that there's some light, which of course is sunlight, and it comes to the plant along with water coming to the plant, and in return carbon dioxide is also entering in, and in return it gives off oxygen. And so the three things that a plant needs in order for photosynthesis to occur is sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, and in return it makes oxygen that we can use. The plant benefits because of the fact that the sunlight converts sugars into energy for the plant, and so during this process they make their own food, and we're going to spend a lot more time looking at photosynthesis and how it actually works in the next section. But plants get their own food by using a process called photosynthesis. Plants are multicellular, which means that they have many cells and a cell wall. They also have a vacuole, which is inside of them that is used to store food and water. And that vacuole is kind of, imagine a balloon, and how the balloon, when there's nothing inside of it, kind of collapses. But if you blow into the balloon, obviously it gets bigger and bigger. And so as the plant goes through photosynthesis, as it takes in water, that balloon inside of it, or what we call as the vacuole, is going to expand and expand. And it kind of stores the food and the water for the plant for when it needs it. Also, there is a part of the plant that is found inside of the cell called the chloroplast. And what that does is it looks like a green jelly bean if you were to look at it underneath a microscope. And it's where the food gets made. There's a chemical that's inside the chloroplast that's called chlorophyll, and so when the sunlight strikes this chemical, it helps to convert it into energy and sugars that are needed for the plant. And so some of the important features of plants is that they're multicellular, that they contain a vacuole, and also that they have an area that's called chloroplast, which holds the chlorophyll, which converts the chemical into energy. Some of the ways that plants are able to live on land is that they are able to obtain water and other nutrients. They are able to do that through a root system, and if we're talking about vascular plants, they have very, very long, deep roots that are able to go down into the aquifer and pull up water, while plants that are not vascular, so we call those non-vascular, are growing lower to the ground and oftentimes retain their water by basically allowing themselves to accept more of it when it is raining out, but also they tend to grow in the shade where the sun isn't going to dry them out. They're all able to retain water in some capacity. They transport materials. So obviously if we're looking at this palm tree that's off to the side here, the root system is down towards the ground and in the ground, and what happens is they have to get water all the way up to the top of the plant. And so the way this works is that there's two parts, one that's called xylem and the other one that's called phloem, and they use this pumping system. It's kind of like an elevator system where a lot of the photosynthesis is occurring towards the top, and so a lot of the food and energy is at the top, and it has to be pumped all the way down throughout the entire plant, just like the water has to get pumped up all the way from the bottom to the top. And so they use kind of this elevator system called xylem and phloem to help pump these materials back and forth. If you've ever seen a palm tree, you'll notice that it has a thick outer coating, which we oftentimes refer to as a bark, but these guys have a very, very, very strong support system that allows for them to stand straight up and get closer to the sunlight. And then also plants are able to reproduce, and they do that through a process that we'll talk about at the end of this section. The way that plants are classified is in two fashions. They are either listed as non-vascular, which means that the plants lack a a well-developed system of tubes to transport water and other materials. And so over here you can see this is moss that is growing on a forest floor and also onto a tree. And these don't get much more than a couple of centimeters off the ground. And so they're low growing. And the way that they work this is that they basically have cells that are right next to each other, and so they're able to pass the materials, pass water, pass food right next to each other through cells. And so that's one characteristic of non-vascular plants, but all plants are either categorized as either being non-vascular or vascular. A vascular plant is where it has true vascular tissue, which means that it is able to provide itself with strength and stability and support. These are oftentimes much larger growing plants, either trees or large bushes or shrubs, or in this case I have a picture of some wheat that is down here. And so those are examples of vascular. So the two ways that we classify plants, which hopefully you know, you're going to discover through your lab that it was difficult to classify plants, but the two ways we do it is either non-vascular or vascular. The life cycle of a plant. And so what we have here for our life cycle is that there is a stage that is called the sporophyte. And so sporophyte means that they're going to produce little spores. And when we're talking about spores, I'd like you to think of them as little cells that contain a bunch of information that they're going to be able to make new plants. And so what happens is that there are basically a male and female types of spores, or cells, if you want to think of it that as being that way. But what happens is that the two of those produce these male and female types of cells, and what happens is that they come together, and when they come together they're able to fertilize, which ends up making a zygote, and then that grows into the seed that you see, which eventually grows into the plant. And so imagine that there's a plant that produces these little cells. These little cells are both male and female. they end up fertilizing and creating a zygote. And I actually have a better drawing for you to be able to see that here on the next slide. So here is a better image of it. So this is a fern, and on the underside of the fern there's these little, they look like little dots, and what those are little spores that are containing a bunch of genetic information. And with that information there is also going to be the males and the females, and obviously they are able to come together, and as they are fertilized they are going to make the seed, and then the seed is going to grow into the plant, which is going to become large. And so there's basically two phases to a plant's life cycle. There is a sporophyte stage, which is the production of the spores, and a gametophyte stage, which is where the plant is growing from a seed. And so two parts to a plant's life cycle. We will talk more about this in detail when we are in class together. All right, talk to you later.